Everyone, welcome to the end of the summer hiatus of the SPNI webinar series. Welcome, 30 people already and joining every second. Happy to see everybody back here. Please let us know in the chat who you are, where you're from. We're happy to engage, have an exciting webinar tonight, and a very interesting menu of webinars coming up for this fall and early winter. Online, you can find in the messages that we send you our upcoming and recorded webinars. We have another 5 planned between now and the end of October, including a live birding webinar in the field, or 2 of them, I believe, 2 live birding webinars in the field that are a little at an earlier time, with apologies to you people on the West Coast of the States, but we need to do them, those live birding webinars during the daylight. 8 p.m. here in Israel. The other ones are going to start, I think, one at 3:30 in the afternoon and one at 4 in the afternoon Israel time. So early on the East Coast, very early on the West Coast, but you Europeans and Israelis can enjoy those in a comfortable late afternoon time. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jay Shofet from the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, coming to you in Tel Aviv. Excited and very interested to get this webinar going. I'll be interviewing my friend, Daniel Chamovitz of the Ben-Gurion University, president of the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. Daniel will be coming to us from his home in the greater Tel Aviv area. I'm in my home in Tel Aviv, and we are going to be getting going in just a moment or two. Thanks everybody for joining, and looking forward to getting things underway. We've had a hot summer around the globe, hot in many ways. In Israel, June and July were fairly reasonable for Israel, and August and now September have been quite warm. Late summer heat wave has reminded us of climate change if we thought we were going to forget it. Things have been getting warmer all over the place. We'll be talking about the reasons and what we can do about it here on this warming planet. Looking forward to interviewing Danny, hearing about the new Climate Change School Act. The chat is disabled. I just got a text from someone, David. Can you, I don't know, actually, I see we have the chats are, no, people are writing questions and answers, but not in the chat feature. I don't know, we'll work on that. Haven't heard, okay, chat is now working, guys, sorry about that. Thank you very much, Jonathan Silverstein, our board chair in Austin, for alerting us to that fact. Let us know where you're from. It's a fun feature, and we like to see that. And yes, people have written that the chat function is not active, but now it is. So welcome, people already visiting from participating here from New York City and from London. There are over 80 of you so far now on the Zoom. So let's just hear who you are, where you are. SPNI is in for a busy fall season as well. The environmental movement in general is going to be active first in the UN COP climate change talks, COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh. Takes place about 100 miles, 150 miles south of the Israeli border on the end of the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. But I think the whole movement learned from Glasgow, where thousands and thousands of people descended on that city and created what we call a balagan, that Sharm el-Sheikh is going to be a little smaller, a little better organized in terms of what's going on there. But we, SPNI, will be represented there by our CEO and a few other professionals who will be talking both about nature-based solutions to climate change. Okay, somebody writes that they can't get into the Zoom, but I'm not sure how to help them. Everybody else is in. But we will be talking about nature-based solutions to climate change, how the twin crises of of biodiversity loss and habitat loss, and also climate change, are really feeding into each other. We'll also be talking about urban nature. There'll be a special section there on accessible nature in our cities, and that's something that we at SPNI, our professional Amir Balaban. Okay, chat is still disabled. Chat is still disabled. Well, I'm sorry about that, folks. You can please let us know who you are in the Q&A features. I don't know why it is disabled now, but hopefully we can get that fixed. And if not, okay, working now, not disabled. Great, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Daniel from the UK. Appreciate it very much. It's great to see people from everywhere, from Austin and from Pembroke, Florida, and in New York, and all places. All right, well, we're about 5 minutes after the hour. We got about 100 people online, and I'm not sure what our Facebook looks like at the moment, but I think we're going to get going. And it will be my pleasure to introduce our guest for this evening, Professor Chamovitz. Daniel, turning on your video.
Hey, Jay, how are you?
Really great to see you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great to see you too.
I appreciate your taking the time out of your evening to
oh, it's the first game of the NFL season, so I really must love you and SPNI.
I appreciate that very much. We all do. We know that, well, I know, and everybody will learn that you're just a small-time boy from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. Am I saying that correctly?
You got it right.
Some place in Western Pennsylvania that has made you a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And
it's in the DNA.
It is. It is. Steelers are an American football team for you non-Americans on the video, and those that have no interest in that sport. But I'm a big fan myself. My team plays later tonight, so we'll see if I can stay up. But anyway, Danny Chamovitz is the president of Ben-Gurion University. 4 years now?
Closing in on 4 years soon, yeah.
Danny grew up in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, as I said, a small town. He studied at Columbia and at Hebrew University and at Yale University. He's been he's a professor of plant biology, former dean of life sciences at Tel Aviv University, and author of a best-selling, popular, incredible book called What a Plant Knows. It's been translated to 18 languages. A very interesting book. And Danny, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you very much. Thank everybody for joining. And just to let you know, if I'm glancing here, yes, the first American football game was Thursday. The season opened, but it mostly opens today. We got people coming from New Mexico, from Maryland, from Toronto, from Modi'in, Beersheba, and all over, Shoresh and Binghamton and
Montreal, Canada.
Cleveland. Yes, the Steelers are playing now. Maybe Barbara Thomas is going to be giving you updates on the chat. And although I guess they're screaming the scores from the next room if there's any touchdowns. So anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate it very much. And I just want to start with a question about your book. So you're an expert on plant biology, plant genetics, and we're here to talk about climate change. So as a plant biologist, have you seen the effects of climate change in Israel over your career here in the last 20, 30 years? And globally, what can you say about what's happening to the flora of the globe? We talk a lot about wildlife on these webinars, and not too much other than the afforestation policies of Israel. We don't talk too much about the flora. So,
well, you should be talking a lot about plants, much more about plants, Jay, than about animals. I mean, even though animals are maybe cuddly and furry, and we make us feel good when we look at them. But if you think about it right now, you're wearing everything we do in life is dependent on plants. You're wearing dead plants. I'm drinking dead plants right now. We all eat plants. Some of us inhale plants. Well, no, we all inhale plants. All the oxygen that we breathe comes from plants. Many of the medicines that we take originally came from plants, still coming from them. If you play a musical instrument, you know that a guitar with an ebony fingerboard and a spruce body has a different sound than one with a redwood body. Anyone who plays basketball or does gymnastics knows that a wood floor is completely different than a synthetic one. Everything we do in our life is completely dependent upon plants. But we often sort of ignore them. You know, we sort of don't relate to them as inanimate objects around us. Maybe, you know, we like gardening a little bit, bring flowers to people. There was just actually a great study coming out of Ben-Gurion University last week, which showed that flowers actually change our moods. So everything we do is dependent on plants, but we don't necessarily give them the same thought of day that we do the beautiful animals that you have in the calendar of the Society for Protection of Nature. And considering this, it behooves us to understand how plants are affected by changes in the environment, even much more so than animals, because if you consider global warming, for example, if a animal, a human, finds themselves in a place where there's increasing temperatures and until it's uncomfortable, what are they going to do? They're going to migrate. You know, one of the big changes of global warming is migrating of populations of animals, of humans from hot areas all the way, you know, north or south to cooler climates. But think about the poor plant. It's literally rooted in one place. You know, animals, when they're in a bad environment, humans, where there's, you know, you can't find water, if you don't have any food, it's too cold, it's too hot, you're looking for a mate, you can run away, you can move, you can find a better environment. But the plant can't, literally rooted in one place. And therefore, relative to animals, plants are much more sophisticated in their ability to sense the environment, to sense changes in environment so that they can adapt in place in order to survive. So we really need to understand how plants sense their environment so that we can utilize that for our own needs.
So how do plants sense their environment? What do plants know and what are they telling you?
Well, just like us, plants have incredibly complex sensory mechanisms. Plants are actually more sensitive to light, and that's not surprising, than people are. You know, we have a total of 4 different types of photoreceptors in our bodies that allow us to see all the colors of the rainbow, right? That's why it's called the visible spectrum. Plants have upwards of 13 different photoreceptors, which allow them to see UV light and respond to it, which we're blind to, far red light, which we're blind to see differences in light intensities, light directions, also that the plant can get to the light to do photosynthesis. So plants really can, they can differentiate between red and blue, for example. You know, plants can sense touch. They have touch receptors very similar to the receptors that humans have, so that they know if they're being blown in the wind or touched by an insect. Plants can smell. Not, of course, plants have a smell, but plants also have a sense of smell. Plants smell each other, and they use those signals to know if they're being attacked by insects or viruses. There's even evidence, really very new evidence, that plants can hear. And above all of this, plants have memory. Plants can remember. Plants can remember for example, a climatic event that happened when they were seedlings. Remember that information until it's time to flower, and then utilize that to flower at the right time.
Wow.
So plants have all of the senses that we do.
Wow. I mean, and that would lead me to the question we're facing. So if they have that memory of what was many years ago and the globe is changing, what was once will not be. How will that affect them?
Well, the truth is, from a plant's point of view, I'm a little optimistic. I'm actually very optimistic. flowering plants as we know them today were on the planet way before humans were here. And all mammals, actually. You know, today there's over 250,000 species of flowering plants. And each of them is attuned very specifically to survive in their own environment. Plants have adapted over millennia in order to know how to deal with a changing environment. That's why, for example, an oak tree in the United States or a pine tree can survive. I'm talking in Celsius, you'll have to translate this into Fahrenheit, you know, from minus 30 in the winter, minus 20 in the winter, all the way up to 40 degrees in the summer, you know.
Wow.
What's that, like minus, like 20 degrees below zero up to 110 degrees. Think about it. Standing in the same place, and they survive that. They survive droughts. If I would put you in that one place, like pour concrete on your feet, you wouldn't survive very long in those temperatures. So the plants will find a way to survive climate change. They will adapt. But the question is, will the plants that we need know how to adapt? And while we really want to think of all the wild plants in nature, we're dependent on the plants that have been cultivated for food, for resources in order to survive. A difference in 2 degrees. The difference in 2 degrees is the difference between wheat pollinating and yielding seed and wheat not yielding any seed.
And I mean, there's so much genetic engineering of agriculture going on. This surprises me now, what you're saying. I mean, I know it in general, but if plants are already so resilient, and we invented the cherry tomato, right? And a lot of other cool things. We can't just engineer a wheat that grows in 2 degree higher temperatures.
Well, first of all, we can potentially. What that means is that we have to have the resources to do the research. And it means that we also have to have the acceptance of the public to accept these crops for the good of the world. We actually have the ability now to really specifically generate plants that are suited for a particular environment. This is where the research in plant biology is going. And it's critical that we have a whole toolbox of seeds, of techniques, so that we can continually yield newer and newer crops. Well, one of the big problems in modern agriculture, as you probably know, is monoculture. Using one type of crop. So if you think about it, why was there a potato famine in Ireland, but there's never been a potato famine in South America?
Because of the diversity of the crops there?
Exactly. In Ireland, there was one potato that was brought from South America and was shown to grow really, really well in the British Isles. And it took over all, that was what was cultivated because the yield was so high. It doesn't mean that in South America, there weren't fungal attacks which killed a particular strain of potato, but that there were 100 other strains which were resistant to that fungus, so that there was never any famine because of one particular fungus. So with modern agriculture, which we have to find the way of doing, is utilizing all these different land strains, but developing them so that all of them give these same high yields as the one strain that we've been using over the past 50 years. So the genetic diversity is there. We just have to utilize it.
But having done that, so what you're making me think more than I ever have, that habitat loss itself is due, yes, to increasing high temperatures, which are affecting life, flora, and fauna.
We can use wheat as a classic example of this. So we're lucky in Israel that we have several wheat gene banks. And there were some really pioneering people with incredible vision. One was a professor at Ben-Gurion at Tel Aviv University named Yeshua Annixter. Now, for those of you who don't know, Israel, the whole Fertile Crescent is where wheat was originally cultivated. And Aaron Aronson, from Neely, one of the original Zionist pioneers at the beginning of the 20th century, isolated in Israel the mother of modern wheat. It was one of the strains which was first cultivated or used for cultivating wheat about 20,000 years ago. Okay, it's called, in Hebrew, it's called emachita. It's called wild emmer wheat. Wild emmer wheat grows as a weed in Israel. Okay, but it is one of the progenitors of all of the wheat all over the world. So now what is the difference between a weed and a cultivated plant? A cultivated plant is one that we've bred over hundreds or thousands of years. It gives really high yield, but it's really weak. It can't grow without us. What's a weed? It's a plant that we want to kill, but can't. Right? And so wild wheat is actually a weed growing around Israel. And what Yeshua Annixter and others like him did is they had the foresight to go around to different construction sites all over Israel, isolating these wild strains that were in those sites, like around the Sharon region, in the Haifa region, in the Golan Heights, in the Negev, around Jerusalem, before the ecosystems were destroyed. And so we have these seed banks with thousands of accessions of wild wheat. They're all called wild emmer wheat, but they all came from different ecosystems. And now with the modern tools that we have, the modern genetic tools, we can survey these strains for the strains that are more resistant to heat, for the strains that are more resistant to drought, for the strains that are more resistant maybe to a pathogen, and use these in modern breeding programs. So yeah, you're right. The loss of habitats is a loss of genetic diversity, which is a loss of potential for humans.
True. That's fascinating. I feel we should move on to the topic of the day, but
oh, that wasn't the topic of the day?
Well, it is, but I want to hear about your climate change school and how that's going to change things for the globe. But just one more question on this issue about agriculture and habitat loss. You're a vegan or a vegetarian? I don't remember. One of those?
I'm a pescatarian, vegetarian wannabe.
A pescatarian, vegetarian wannabe. Oh, that's pretty close. And a huge percentage.
And the reason that I'm a vegetarian, I became a vegetarian 3 years ago this month. And the reason is that the amount of resources it takes to making meat, depending on what type of meat we're talking about, is 10 times more than it takes to make plants, a plant-based diet. And the more we reduce our dependence on animal protein, the less habitats we have to destroy, the less carbon footprint we'll have. And I couldn't justify even my own little effect on the world's carbon footprint by eating meat anymore.
An inspiration. Nobody could disagree with that. Yeah. Thank you. So Danny, you announced the launching of your new Ben-Gurion University of the Negev's new school for climate change and sustainability.
The Goldman Sonnenfeld School of Sustainability and Climate Change.
Goldman Sonnenfeld School of Sustainability and Climate Change.
Yeah.
And that will be on the campus.
When I got to Ben-Gurion University a little under 4 years ago, I was bringing with me the experience that I had at Tel Aviv University, where I founded Israel's first program in food security. This was over 10 years ago. And we realized very quickly there that food security is not only a problem of plant genetics, but it's a problem of sociology, economics, and public health. And that if you can't bring everyone to the same scientific table, the same academic table, you're losing a huge amount of potential. And getting academics to collaborate, for those of you who are in academia, you'll know that that's not always the easiest thing in the world. And when I got to Ben-Gurion University, it was clear to me that the one field that Ben-Gurion University has an advantage over almost every university in the world has to be sustainability and climate change. And that's because of David Ben-Gurion. I want to paraphrase a quote from David Ben-Gurion from 1958. 1958 was the year they founded the Ben-Gurion, the Desert Research Institute in Beersheba, which then grew into Ben-Gurion University. Okay, 1958. Ben-Gurion says something like this: scientists and researchers will sit in the gates of the Negev, uncover its secrets, how to make energy from the sun, water from the air, food from the barren sands, to take advantage of resources that are until now going to waste. 1958,
wow.
Yeah. And based on that, Ben-Gurion University was founded. We needed to learn, it was a Zionist imperative, how to live, how to thrive in our desert. And that's why we have Israel's largest water research center, the Zuckerberg Institute for Water Research, Israel's largest desert agriculture center, and Israel's largest solar energy center. I mean, it makes sense. This was what we had to do. But somewhere along the line, we neglected to recognize that what we thought was a local problem is really a global problem, and that people from all over the world, universities and governments, were coming to learn from us. And this is especially true following the Abraham Accords. And so that it's not only the technology that's important, it's also a question of public health, it's a question of economics, it's a question of engineering, and I'll tell you something interesting, it's also a question of Hebrew literature. I'll get to that in a second. Yeah, I'll get to that in 1 second. And the only thing I needed to do was to get these 150 academics to agree to sort of abandon the interests of their own particular department and come together to work together. And following a lot of cajoling and working, everyone basically realized that they had started their scientific careers for the same reasons. And once we got, and that there was much more to gain by collaborating than there was to lose by not collaborating. And so the School of Sustainability and Climate Change has over 155 researchers from about 24 different departments across the university, developing interdisciplinary undergraduate degrees because, for example, a plant geneticist has to understand the intricacies of international development, and an economist has to understand the modeling involved in climate. You know, it's not enough to just be one discipline. We need to learn to talk to each other, because it's when you bring people together, I call it the power of coffee. When you bring people together, you know, from different fields, the ideas that come out are amazing. And when I said Hebrew literature, that's how I know we had won. Because this year, the Department of Hebrew Literature had one of the world's first seminars on cli-fi, climate fiction.
Yeah.
So the question is, how has the climate crisis influenced literature, what people write about? And how has literature influenced public perception? Maybe Jonathan Safran Foer is having a bigger effect than any research that I'm doing in my lab. And so when the School of Hebrew Literature, the Department of Hebrew Literature joined the school, that's when we knew we had hit the right thing.
Wow. That's a fascinating point. I don't know. I haven't really read much cli-fi yet. Is there anything optimistic about that literature, or?
Well, no, actually, most of it is rather apocalyptic.
Yeah.
You know, but most science, there's a great book called Semiosis, which I finished, which I read last year, which is about something like that, about a plant-based world where the plants become the dominant species.
Cool. Listen, the question just came in now in the chat. I'm reading, and I think we should ask it. Does it include a school or college of education? Because
well, there are researchers from our School of Education, which are members of the school. The school itself does not have departments. It has individual researchers who are in their departments. And so there is definitely one of the founding researchers was from the School of Education who was working on curriculum to be used in the school system in order to get students at a young age to be climate literate.
Wow. Well, that's what we do in Chevra Laganat Teva as well, in our elementary schools and junior highs, to some degree high schools as well. But this is another, so much of these.
We have a great program around our stable care campus. I forget what it's called, but it's for the Bedouin students in the remote villages in the upper Negev, where they come to learn sustainability on our stable care campus.
Excellent. But how does this work in theory? Because if it's not a school, people, in other words, how many different faculties or departments did you say were represented?
23.
23. Yeah. Now, these people are physically still going to be sitting in their own offices and working in their own labs.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
So where's the coffee? How do they get together and how do they create?
The coffee comes at seminars, conferences, joint students, and it's mainly we're putting the emphasis on the students because it's almost like when we put the emphasis on the students, they will then cause their PIs, their lab leaders, to come together.
So if I want to study biology or chemistry today at Ben-Gurion, can I choose a track that focuses
exactly? So what we've done, for those of you who don't know Israeli academia is very European, early 20th century based. You study one thing, or maybe you do two things of equal size. You have one major or a double major. There's no such thing as a minor in Israel. There's no such thing as a liberal arts degree. But I don't believe there's no such thing as no such thing. And what we've done is we've built sustainability climate change minors. So we have one that's on natural resource development. We have so people in the sciences in STEM have to take, if they want to be part of the school, they have to take their minor in humanities, business, social sciences. If you're a student in geography or economics or business or Hebrew literature, you have to take your minor in one of the STEMs. But they are courses from numerous departments make up the minor.
Are those STEM classes? When I attended Dartmouth 1,000 years ago in New Hampshire, and we had a distributive requirement. We had to take science. We had to take 4 science classes during our time. But
you took rocks for jocks?
Exactly, and stars for jars. Exactly. So because science is tough. The real sciences are very hard for us liberal arts.
When we offer the international development, even the economics or the public policy courses, that's everyone together.
Mm-hmm.
But when we've developed STEM courses that are aimed at the non-STEM students.
Right. Great. Good to hear.
And the really cool thing is we're waiting for the final approval from the Council of Higher Education. We're now developing, we're going to be offering a complete undergraduate degree in desert studies and sustainability, which is going to be given at our Stable Care campus in English.
Oh,
and that's going to be a complete STEM-based class, between water, agriculture, and solar.
Interesting. Do you also have an affiliation with the Arava Institute? Will any of those studies be there?
Well, we give academic accreditation for the Arava Institute. The Arava Institute it's a great place. It's not a university. It's not a college. Its goal is to bring Palestinians, Arabs, Jews together using sustainability as the glue. Some of their classes are based on Ben-Gurion University curriculum, and those we accredit so they could get a transcript from Ben-Gurion University. So we give them the accreditation for classes that meet our standards.
And that, among other things, deal with climate change and
right.
That type of issues.
So for example, the Arava Institute is a place for someone to do like a semester abroad or something like that, and they could come and get their transcript from Ben-Gurion University.
I see. Cool.
Actually, through our campus in Eilat.
Okay, I didn't know you had a campus in Eilat down there.
Yeah, that's where we do marine science. There's very little marine science in Ben-Gurion University in Beersheba.
Yeah, no, it's tough these days.
Yeah. Actually, that's not true because there are ancient lake beds.
I was just going to say that.
Which is really interesting for studying. So we just hired someone in archaeology who's dealing with climate change.
Interesting. How so?
Because if you look throughout Israel, and if you read the Bible, you'll say that God was unhappy with the people of a certain town, and he smiteth, or whatever the word is, the town. And so you go through, you find the town, and you look through the ruins, and you can, by looking at the various seeds that are found, the fossilized seeds, you can actually see over a period of 20 years, you went from a rainy period to a massive drought. And this massive drought is what caused the city to be abandoned. And so you can measure climate change and its effect on society through archaeology. It's a fascinating field.
Really interesting. So you said very modestly that all you had to do was get these 150 different individuals from 23 different disciplines together. And that way you were modest, because I'm sure that must be very, very hard. And because you and I and a few of our friends, well, not me, but you and a few of our friends have been deeply involved in academia, I kind of have some more deep dive questions about that. But before we get to that, or if we don't get to that,
actually, I can say one thing, Jay. There was one department which will remain unnamed, which was incredibly paranoid about this school because they thought that their birthright to being known as sustainability was being taken from them. And with this particular department, I made a deal. I said, you know what? I'm going to give you an insurance policy. If you lose students because of this school, because students are now registering with this, with these, I will guarantee you 5 years that your budget won't be cut. Okay. And what happened? Their enrollment doubled this year.
Really? Yeah, that makes sense.
And now, of course, they think it was their idea.
That's funny. But because you're not offering the major, you're offering a minor and a
right, exactly.
What's the word? Integrative program.
And this is what young people are interested in. They realize that this is what's critical. One of the reasons we did it is that Israel has done a great job, a worldwide job of attracting the best minds to cyber research, for example, right? And how has that affected the world and Israel? We've done the same thing by attracting people into brain research over the past decade and a half, 2 decades. We got to do that with sustainability and climate change. If we don't attract Israel's best young students, the ones who have graduated from 8200, the ones who have, I'm talking that's what's needed to have a massive effect 10 years hence.
A trend that was really begun in Israel by your former university when they opened the Porter School of Environmental Science.
Environmental studies.
Studies.
Right.
Okay, good point.
Yeah.
Not just science, but even then climate.
Yeah. Lady Porter really got the idea that this is what was needed, this interdisciplinarity. As we know that the best laid plans of mice and men, these things are not always as easy to implement as we would hope that they would be.
Mm-hmm. So, Danny, as difficult or perhaps ultimately inevitable as it was that academics have to get together, they still needed funding. I mean, I'm sure that must have been a slight worry of yours if you were thinking of this major sea change and how you're going to approach climate change.
So yeah, funding, and I know that's a really important thing for you in general because yes. So I had a couple of messages to my faculty members. I said, let's make the school, the funding will come. A lot of them said, get me funding, we'll make the school. And I can say that Michael Sonnenfeld and his wife, Katya Goldman, as soon as we made the school, they just stood up and said, we want to support this. They've been involved with the university 20, 30 years ago, big philanthropic family. And they really stood up and they've now given the funding to allow the school to do what it wants to do. That's number one. But more than that, and this is actually a tricky question though, we've seen that industry really wants to be involved with the school because all industries also understand that their future is dependent on how they are not only perceived, but how they interact with the environment. And so we've been getting a lot of donations from Israeli companies and from Israelis for the school. For example, I'll just give one, Israel's largest air conditioning company, Electra. They found themselves in problems that there's no doubt that the only way people can continue to be living in some parts of the world is with air conditioning. Yes, we have to change our building techniques. We have to change our building styles. And that's why also our Department of Environmental and Civil Engineering is growing very quickly. But air conditioning is necessary. If you've ever been to Abu Dhabi or Dubai or Tel Aviv in the summer, But even worse, where's one of the biggest problems now? Europe. If you've been to Germany, and we see deaths in Canada because, and now you have houses that were constructed 20, 50, 100 years ago that weren't even built for air conditioning. And so we need new technologies that are going to be greener, more efficient, and that fit the right architecture of these countries. And the problem is cooling engineers is considered low tech, when really this is the new high tech. And so we're working with Electra, for example, in order to understand the effect of air conditioning and heating on human health, and to train a new generation of engineers who want to go into this field.
We will definitely keep you in touch. We're beginning, we run a couple of sort of leadership tours to Israel every year. We've been doing, they're like week-long tours, shows off the biodiversity and what's going on here. But we want to move towards tours featuring Israel's eco-innovation. And we've attracted top minds, not just in cybersecurity but there's a lot of fields in which we have the top minds.
Well, in Beersheba now, there's been a commitment through the Prime Minister's office to build around the university the new Desert Tech Innovation Center. The Mirage Foundation is involved in this, which is supposed to make a high-tech park, an industrial zone, all dedicated to climate technologies and desert tech.
Desert tech, I'm hearing that word for the first time.
Isn't that great? That's a great branding, isn't it?
It is a good branding. I hear a new something tech like every week in this country, but yeah, that's really interesting. So get back for a second about the support. So the Michael Sonnenfeld and Katja Goldman. Where are they from?
They're from New York.
They stood up. Have others stood up, or are there other people clamoring to, help you build? Are you building buildings, by the way, or are you just?
No, we're not looking for buildings. We're looking for programs and research.
Right.
I'll be happy if there's anyone out there who wants to give me $50 million for a building. I will gladly take it.
Hey, that was not part.
Oh, right. Sorry. That's right. But no, we're not building. We're doing research. Some of the research we do is with SPNI, as you know. But what we're interested is in programs and teaching and research. Buildings, that's less important. We don't need edifices.
Right. No, I absolutely. But it's interesting that if you are looking for it, though, and if somebody stood up and said, I want to support climate change by building a building for the coffee, I assume you'd
what we would probably build is a new building for civil engineering, civil and environmental engineering, to give them better facilities for what they need.
I see, and to up the status of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. But what about other donors or other supporters, or what about the vibe in general among your, American?
There's a lot of interest in it. One of the things we're working on right now is we're founding the Israeli Institute for Climate and Sustainability Policy Studies. It's going to be a policy institute connected with the university, because we have to be looking outward also. Academic research that has no impact on society has done nothing. And so we want to have a policy, and so we're building a policy institute, which will run alongside the academic side of the school, which will be working on policy papers and studies commissioned to see what are the what are the ways we should be acting in all over the place. I'm sure this is probably great interest, the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah.
And the other thing we want to do, and this is actually coming from Michael himself, if we don't learn how to interact with industry and change industry, we're not going to have any effect whatsoever. Michael is a big believer that industry is there, and it's always going to be there, and and that we have to be working with industry, not against industry.
I think that's an unassailable truth. We have a program, I don't know if you're familiar with, Alone Rothschild runs, called Tampa Biz, where we've been running for several.
I know Alone. What is the program? It's
called Teva Biz. It's about helping businesses change their business model to be more, sustainability is not the word we're looking for, but to be less harmful to biodiversity.
Exactly.
That particular niche. And yeah, I truly believe that. And by the way, you alluded, if we were talking a little bit about fundraising, you alluded to the delicate part there of the whole businesses, because we all know that I mean, the biggest polluting industries in Israel would love to have their name plastered all over the climate change school, as they would have over SPNI. We could be fully funded if we took money from the oil refineries and the chemical.
We won't take a donation from anyone, first of all, who wants to have an influence, from any company that wants to influence what we're doing. That's number one. On the other hand, we have to remember, we won't give naming to any industry.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we have to remember that Ford and Rockefeller and Carnegie were really awful people. And we love taking money from the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundations, this is, and if you look in the United States, it's industry which is really funding so much of higher education today. And there's a lot of money in Israel from industry. If we had a government that thought that higher education and that type of research is where we should be getting millions and millions of dollars, then no problem. But we live in a world where we need resources, as does SPNI. And so these are very fine lines that we have to be walking along. And don't kid yourselves. There are industries that outwardly, I don't want to get into the discussion about, certain, let's say a fertilizer company, we will leave them without names, or chemical companies. There is no agriculture in the world, none, without the use of fertilizers, phosphates, none. It just doesn't exist without chemicals. And we tend to suffer from not in my backyard, let's have it be done in China, Africa, Morocco, but not in my, So anytime we're eating, we are using chemicals that were made by a chemical company. And to say that these companies are inherently bad is just wrong.
Okay. And since you besmirch the Rockefellers, Carnegies, and Fords, Ford will set aside. He was really a bad guy. Jonathan Silverstein wrote a comment here I want to bring up to you. Are you talking about the business models of Standard Oil, of the Rockefellers, no,
the way they treated their workers. The way they treated their workers.
Oh.
100
years ago or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Right. Yeah, there are many ways to judge
right.
those kinds of businesses, but
yeah.
Okay. We have lots of questions going on here. People were not. I
want to remind you that for our age and above, in the 80s, you remember how Microsoft was the dark side, and Microsoft was killing all innovation, and they killed WordPerfect, and we thought they were a monopoly, and we got to do something about Microsoft. Now we all love the Gates Foundation.
Right. But I mean, what's the analogy there to the way resources are being taken out of the Dead Sea and profit?
No, what I'm just saying is that we are we're very fluid in our moral Yeah, actually, one of the things where I was just approached. One of the things where we also are thinking of set up, if we find the right funder. This I'm not fundraising from you. Is a center for ethics and innovation.
Oh, very interesting.
I think our students really need to be challenged with these ideas.
Yeah.
You know, what is an ethical decision in these fields?
Right. And I mean, I think, you know, and as somebody who considers themselves at best a meat reducer, I do think that.
I've seen you eat. I don't even think reducer is the right word.
Thank you, Daddy. Every once in a while, I choose falafel over shawarma. You're not with me, but I make the falafel choice. But you know, I do kind of think that in some decades from now, 3, 5, 10, 100, 50 decades, I don't know, 10 decades, we will be looking at the meat industry today, animal husbandry in its modern industrial form, the way we look at slavery today. You know.
Oh, you're talking from the ethical point of view.
From the ethical point of view, yeah, looking at it from 100 years hence, the way we treat animals. So yeah, I
and by the way, this is why we need to develop crops that don't need these chemicals. We can do that. And so if we could develop crops that need less fertilizer, we reduce our dependency on fertilizers. Well, what would that affect the world?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a great point. It's true. Most people wrote questions in chats. I'm going to have to go through and ferret them out. But in the question and answers, somebody asked about, just to paraphrase the question, make it a little broader. He asked about the lack of adaptability of drought of the pine trees in the Rockies of northern New Mexico. A lot of them are dying due to drought. Can't they? You mentioned plants adapting to climate. Can they adapt to lack of water? And is that something that plants do?
There are plants that are completely adapted to lack of water. We live in a country that has them.
Right. No, but can a plant species itself or an individual plant learn?
Well, it depends if he has the genetic capacity to do it because they have been exposed to these stresses in the past. Mm-hmm. I don't know much about pine trees in New Mexico, but my guess is if the drought continues for 20 or 30 years, there will be a different tree species which will take its place in succession in the ecosystem.
Okay, interesting. Here's a question from Walnut Creek, California.
I like the name.
Excuse me?
I like the name.
Judy Adler.
No, Walnut.
Yeah, Walnut Creek, yeah. To what extent are regenerative practices a component in your educational program?
I didn't catch the question.
To what extent are regenerative practices a component of your educational program?
I'm not even sure what's a regenerative practice.
I hope we
teach. We have classes in natural resource protection and in but I'm not exactly sure what regenerative practice is.
Well, I don't know if you've heard me talk about our rewilding project, Startup Nature, where we're taking former fish ponds and rewilding them into wetland habitats, wetland nature reserves. But this is the year of the decade of environmental restoration from the UN, ecological restoration. And it means getting habitats back to where they were, degraded forests. There's a big program going on in the cairns in Scotland now. Europe is big behind regeneration, rewilding, restoring.
But the thing is that let's go back to a university. That itself is not necessarily an academic. I mean, you could have part of a class on that.
Right.
But what you need to understand are ecological principles, and you need to understand ecological modeling in order to really do regenerative practices. You could have a seminar on regenerative practices where you describe what's been done, but it's all based on the basic understanding of ecological principles.
Correct. But somebody writes here that regenerative is a fancy term for sustainable agriculture, which is weird in English, but is that part of what you're going to be talking about? Agriculture, I assume, is one of the disciplines or one of the areas that.
Right. And again, I want to separate between teaching a practice, you could go to, Department of Agriculture and take a class on the DOA will teach farmers, sustainable agriculture. In a university, you're looking at you try to define what is sustainable agriculture. What does that actually mean? It's a great buzzword, sustainable agriculture. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
We like to think that organic is better than industrial, but most organic agriculture. So for example, for anyone in California, if you're eating organic cherry tomatoes, you are basically paying for and drinking water that is sucking Baja California dry. Because in order to make an organic cherry tomato on industrial scale, you need to use several times more water than is used in non-organic farming. And where it's being grown is in Baja California. So it's taking water from Baja California and using it for people who want to feel good about that they're having organic agriculture in maybe Palo Alto.
But
so sustainable is there's not even a defined term for what is sustainable agriculture.
Right. I mean, what you were describing, it's not even, if they're trying to be organic, doesn't even necessarily mean trying to be sustainable, I don't think.
Right. But we tend to confuse all of them.
Right. Right.
And don't forget the idea behind agriculture is one that we get the product, but that the farmer has to be able to make a profit. If the farmer is not making one of the new industries right now is vineyards in the Negev. I don't know if you've seen the vineyards that we've developed through our Department of Desert Agriculture, which have made incredible wines. One of these wineries has a completely closed water system with all the waste from the toilets are 100% recycled, with the water being filtered from technology from our Water Institute. The waste becoming a biochar, which is then turned into methane, which powers the irrigation system. So it's almost like a 100% closed system.
Wow, that's impressive. We're running towards the end of the hour. Question about your graduates. What do they do? Do they find work in Israel typically?
Oh yeah, sure. So for our graduates, depends of course in Israel, yes. We actually just did this study, and I'm not patting ourselves on the back. It ends up that our graduates are the most employable out of any university. I would like to say that's because we teach them well, but probably the reason is that in order to succeed today, you have to know how to work in teams. And Ben-Gurion University attracts students who are looking for a social life. So our students are actually more social, and people who are social in the industry succeed better. So, I'd like to think it's because we teach better. It could be that these are the people we are attracting.
They self-select.
But our graduates are everywhere from academia through to government, through to industry, through to education.
NGOs. You forgot NGOs.
NGOs. That's government. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, non-government. Yes. Right. We're hearing a lot. People are writing about how STEM students and liberal arts students are working together in universities around the country. You might have heard me mention a plan we have at the Chatzeva Field School in the Arava to turn it into a land art institute and have artists and scientists working together on sustainability issues. Is this something that you're? You've alluded to that you have the social scientists and even the humanities now as part of this school. So, to me, I guess the question is, and you really have a minute to answer, and we'll wrap up. How do you generate the togetherness of researchers in such varying fields doing stuff together?
I believe that you put people together and let the magic happen. You can. And it does. It's a completely different example, but we also house Israel's National Autism Research Center. And it's a collaboration of a geneticist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a data scientist, and a social worker. And they just came together over coffee and put all their ideas together and yielded something that's never been done before. I can't tell people what to do. They do it much better than me.
That's an inspiring way to end. I mean, belief in the humans. Now that we've woken up, now that scientists have showed us the way and what we need to do and where we stand. Now we have to just get together and do it. And this school seems like an important step in the right direction. How do you explain that this is Israel's first school? Hasn't come up before.
Well, like you said, there is the Porter School at Tel Aviv, but it was much more narrow.
Mm-hmm.
Because we didn't have a choice at Ben-Gurion. It was clear that we had to do this. I don't know. I can't answer for other universities.
But yeah.
I do know that other attempts were thwarted by fiefdoms. People, don't take over. I call it the Abu Shukri problem. Everyone's, who's the original Abu Shukri hummus? Everyone says, yeah, we should have a school and I should be the center of it.
Right. Well, you guys, I guess, out of necessity, just like Ben-Gurion, just like Israel.
Or I threaten better.
I'm sure it was a carrot and stick.
Exactly.
Sustainably grown carrot and a sustainably grown stick.
Right.
Yes. Well, thank you very, very much, Danny, Professor Chamovitz. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Jay. It was a pleasure.
The 7 minutes into the thing, somebody posted that there was a Steelers scored a touchdown. Can't tell you anything else.
I know. I heard it.
Oh, you heard it from the
Yeah.
All right.
I'm going to go join my kids.
Get into your kids, guys.
My biggest success as a parent in Israel is that my 3 children, all brought up here, are now in my living room watching the Steelers game. And I moved to Israel in 1984. So, there you go.
Nachas.
Okay.
Yeah, good luck to the Steelers. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks. There were a lot of questions I didn't get to. Write me offline or Barry if you have our email addresses. Of course, you do from our communications, and we'll get any questions. I'll get you. I'll forward them to Danny. Thanks. You.
Bye, guys.
Very much, everybody. Thank you, David.
Keep supporting SPNI. They need you.
Thank you so much, Danny. And Ben-Gurion as well, great university. Thank you, David Amichai, at home in Jerusalem, doing back office. Appreciate it very much. Good luck to the Steelers tonight.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.